it's good to see you again. Welcome back to another episode of Heroes Behind the Badge. We tell real stories about real cops. We expose the fake news about the police, and we bring you the real stories. Hi, I'm Dennis Collins, your host. I'm a founding director of Citizens Behind the Badge and a proud law enforcement father. And a reminder, this podcast is brought to you by Citizens Behind the Badge. Citizens Behind the Badge is the leading voice of the American people in support of the men and women of law enforcement. Citizensbehindthebadge.org. Citizensbehindthebadge.org. Check us out. We'd love to have you get involved. Today, I'm joined, as always, by my colleagues, Mr. William Erfurth. Hello, Mr. Erfurth.
Hello, D.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Good. Bill is a 26-year veteran of the Miami-Dade Police Department. He retired as a lieutenant, and he has a very interesting, storied, and highly decorated career. Someday we may do an episode on that. I don't know. No, can't do that.
It's been censored. Yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't be allowed to be published, I guess. Okay. And of course, our fearless leader, the founder, CEO, and president of Citizens Behind the Badge, Mr. Craig Floyd. Hello, Craig. Welcome back.
Good to be with you both, Billy and Dennis.
Always a pleasure. I know Billy gets upset when we don't do this, so this is a reminder that if you like anything you hear on any of our podcasts, do us a favor. Hit subscribe, follow, like, 1, 2, or all 3. That way you will be the first to know when a new episode releases, okay? And we're trying to release as many as possible. And we have got for you lined up some really interesting guests. And if you check back to session 1 and listen on from there, you're going to be amazed. Some really good people with some really deep insights. So today, we have something special. Today, the host becomes the guest. Yes. One of our hosts, Mr. Craig Floyd, we're going to turn the tables on Craig today. He will become today's guest. How about that? And you knew this, Craig, right? Did we tell you or did we try to surprise you?
I had a little heads up. We were sipping some beverages and you leaked.
Yeah.
I'm afraid. Yeah.
I think we were.
He's a leaker.
Yeah, we
Dennis
had
is a leaker.
Oh, don't start that rumor. Yeah, we were having a nice stogie and a little bit of libations, and I was supposed to keep it a secret, but I didn't. So
In
sorry
Washington,
about
D.C.
Yeah. Well,
Of
imagine
all
that.
places, in the
A
swamp.
leaker. Yeah, imagine
Leaking
a leak
in the
Washington,
swamp.
DC. Yeah, that never happens, does it? Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about, you've seen Craig on these podcasts. Many of you know Craig because he founded the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund many years ago. But let me tell you a little bit about the person, Craig Floyd. Craig is a lifelong resident of the Washington, D.C. area. He was born and grew up in Maryland, and he graduated from George Washington University in D.C., just a few blocks from the White House. He's married to the lovely Veronica. He has 2 children and 2 grandchildren. Here's a fun fact about Craig. As a kid, his dad taught him a lot of things, but one of the most interesting things was how to throw a wicked curveball. Yeah, a wicked curveball. Legend has it that very few high school or college baseball players could ever hit that curveball. He was the ace pitcher all throughout his high school and college career. But back in those days, they weren't quite as aware as they are now of protecting the pitcher's arm. And once he actually pitched both ends of a doubleheader. Yes, both ends, according to the facts that I have. And the arm,
both.
Yeah, unfortunately lost his arm too. So any hopes of a pro career were dashed. When Craig's not working hard on Citizens Behind the Badge work and Heroes Behind the Badge work, or spending time with his family, you will be sure to catch him on the golf course. I think he's a pretty good golfer. What we should do one day is have Billy and Craig have a golf playoff. They both are golfers. I am not. I will keep score. Okay, guys? So that's a little bit about Craig, the person. Now, Craig, the professional, 34 years. He was the founding CEO of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. He retired in 2018 after leading a successful 20-year campaign to build the Law Enforcement Museum, which is right across the street in D.C. from the memorial. During Police Week of 2025, on May 13th, the night of the Candlelight Vigil, Craig was honored and awarded the highest honor that is bestowed by the Memorial Fund, the John Ashcroft Distinguished Service Award. This was at a VIP reception in front of the board of directors and all the name readers and the VIPs attending the Candlelight Vigil. It was my honor to be present to watch in person as he received this prestigious and well-deserved recognition. So today, Billy and I will ask him about how all this started. He was there at the very beginning. We'll do a review of Police Week 2025. There are many events, not just the Candlelight Vigil. That's kind of the signature event, but there are many things that go on during Police Week. And of course, we'd like to cover the many memorable moments of his 34-year service to law enforcement and the Memorial Fund. So, first of all, Craig, congratulations. Thank you on your decades of service to the law enforcement community.
Much appreciated. And let me just say it was an honor and a pleasure to have you there with me when we received that award. And I know Bill was at a family event and couldn't be there, but meant a lot to have family and friends with me that evening. All the more special for sure.
Well, your wife and your family and your friends were sworn to secrecy, as you might know. We wanted this to be a surprise for you. And when I walked into the reception, you were chatting with somebody. I tapped you on the back and you turned around and say, "What the hell are you doing here?" You had,
Party crasher.
Yeah, you said, well, we had talked a lot prior to Police Week, and if I was coming, I would have told you, right? But you said, so when did you kind of figure out? I know you were there as a name reader. You were going to be at the VIP reception anyway, but when did you figure out this might be a little different?
Well, it's funny. I got an email from Bill Alexander. He's the current CEO of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. And he had
Right,
called me one day, a month, 6 weeks before the vigil and said, he'd like me to be a name reader, which was
right,
interesting because the prelude to him asking me to be a name reader, he was complaining in a good way about all the people that wanted to be name readers and how was he possibly going to get that many people on stage and that many names to be read. And then he said, "But we want you to be a name reader." And I'm like, "Why squeeze me in when you've got all these other people?" And I told him I had planned a trip to the Outer Banks that week and would not be here. And when I told him that, I could just hear it in his voice that that was very disappointing to him, and he kind of pressed me a little harder. And the more I thought about it, the more I said, "Yeah, I haven't been to a candlelight vigil in 6 years, and I should turn down this very nice invitation, very gracious invitation to be part of the candlelight vigil, which started back in 1989, and I'd been to
right.
more than 30 of them." Anyway, he sends me an email right before the candlelight vigil and reminds name readers, where to show up and et cetera. And in that email, he says, by the way, we're going to be giving out 3 awards, our annual awards that evening at the VIP reception. And the honorees have already been informed as to who they are so they can be prepared to give a few remarks. And so I never thought anything else about it. I
Yeah,
had my names. I was going to read names, and that was going to be it. And I show
right.
up, and I see my family, some of whom were not planning to attend, as far as I knew. I saw some other friends. I saw
Right.
you, and I put it all together. I said, something's up here. And that was a
Something's up.
nice, sneaky way that Bill presented it to me and surprised me.
Yeah. Well,
So, Craig, the
I'm,
big
yeah.
Lifetime Achievement Award, which is amazing for sure. So, you know, you're at the Candlelight Vigil, or the Candlelight Vigil is going to be that evening, and you're going to read the names. And I just think for everybody that's listening to the show, let's talk about the Candlelight Vigil a little bit just to give a reference. And it's, the times I've been there, 20, 30, 40,000 people were jammed into the memorial site where the names are inscribed on the walls. They're holding up the candles. It's an amazing visual for sure. And then the main stage with the dignitaries and whomever are up there reading the names of the individuals that will be inscribed on the walls for this past year. The new names, and I believe there's upwards to almost 25,000 names on there right now. So I wanted to give a reference to that. And then there's this VIP reception just prior to that. It's quite an event. It's a spectacular event. Maybe describe the scene, the location. I know for years it was always at the National Law Enforcement Memorial. It got so big that it was taken out to the National Mall in front of the Capitol building. Is that still the case?
Let's go back to the beginning, because in 1982, that's when ceremonies started to occur during National Police Week in Washington, D.C. It was the Fraternal Order of Police. They organized, along with their auxiliary, a Peace Officers Memorial Day ceremony on May 15th at the Capitol grounds nearby. And 125 people showed up at that first ceremony. It wasn't a big crowd at all. First time any national ceremony had ever been held. So it started small and slowly. And the biggest portion of the crowd, as I remember, was a group of Boy Scouts. I remember Susie Sawyer, who was one of the organizers, called me up. I was working for Congressman Biaggi at the time, and she knew that every congressional office had an American flag, and we did. And she said, we need an American flag for our ceremony. Could you loan it to us? And so we did. But I mean, that's how small it started, very small scale. And then it just grew from there. And from 1982, 125 people to 2025, 30 to 40,000 people attending National Police Week ceremonies. And I was sitting down one day at a lunch with Susie. This is before we ever built the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, but we wanted to have a signature event, something that would let people know that the memorial was in the works, that it would soon be dedicated, and it would be a special place for law enforcement. And the FOP was doing the May 15th service, and we wanted to do something that wouldn't conflict with them. So Susie said, in Arizona, they do a candlelight vigil honoring their fallen officers. Have you ever thought about maybe doing that? And so that's how it really started. One day over lunch in Old Town Alexandria, me and Susie Sawyer came up with the idea. And 1989, we had our first candlelight vigil. It was on the memorial grounds, but it was before we even broke ground on the memorial. And then we eventually, while the memorial was being built, we moved it across the street. And like you said, for many, many years, we held it at the memorial site. And the crowd assembled there got huge. I mean, 30,000 people in a 3-acre space is hard to do. And the Park Service eventually told us that, we were, it was a safety hazard. The fire department was not happy. 30,000 people with candles, packed shoulder to shoulder. When the museum construction occurred right across the street, we lost that space for the vigil. So we moved it to the National Mall. And the Park Service said, from now on, you really need to keep it on the mall because it's gotten too big for the memorial grounds. And I think that was a smart move, because now we can have more people, more visitors to Washington, tourists that might not have any idea what's going on, but they stop, they ask questions, and all of a sudden the crowd swells because you have these tourists joining in to show their support for law enforcement as well. And you've got the Capitol on one end, the Washington Monument on the other. It makes for a spectacular space and beautiful photographs. So we that's how it moved to the mall, and that's where it is today.
Yeah, and the blue lasers representing the thin blue line that cross the sky, the candlelight, the little candles that everybody's holding during the candlelight vigil. It's just a moving, awe-inspiring moment for sure, and just one moment of many during National Police Week up there.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned the blue laser light. That used to be such an integral part of our candlelight vigil when we held it at the memorial. And then we would shine it for the next couple days and during the evening hours as people came to the memorial to reflect on a fallen loved one or colleague. When we moved it to the mall, unfortunately, the aircraft limitations prevent you from having any sort of lasers shining skyward with all these planes coming in and out of national airports. So they prevented us from using the
Yeah.
blue laser light any further. But it was a very moving and a very powerful part of the candlelight vigil for many years.
The great thing about the candlelight vigil is, Craig, unfortunately, this year the weather did not cooperate. Okay, Tuesday, the day of the candlelight vigil, it didn't stop raining all day. It started in the morning and it went all afternoon, and we were hoping it would stop in the evening, and of course it didn't. But that didn't stop people, did it? That mall was packed. That I don't know how many thousands, but as far as you could see, you were up on the stage. You could probably see a lot further than I could. I was out in the audience, but this is a serious, serious event that people come to rain or shine.
Yeah, rain or shine, and I love that. One year out of 37 that we've held the candlelight vigil, it was rained out, and really it was because it was a thunderstorm that just didn't give up.
Right.
And that was in the year 2000. But think about that, 37 years, and only one time did we ever have to reschedule
Yeah.
the event. And you're right. It had never rained throughout the day and throughout the night of a candlelight vigil. It did this year. But as you said, people came prepared. They knew the
They
weather
were
was
ready.
not going to be good. They had their umbrellas, they had their ponchos.
That's
And you
it.
know what? There's some 6,000 survivors, I'm told, that were part of this year's events hosted by the Concerns of Police Survivors, and it's grown and grown. But I mean, these surviving family members, I don't think there's anything that would have kept them away from this very
No.
moving tribute to their fallen loved one and to them. I think it's important that we understand that these ceremonies not only honor the fallen, but they honor the families and the colleagues of those officers who have died in
Yeah.
the line of duty because their
I think,
lives have been
yeah.
ripped apart, and this is an important part of the healing process.
Yeah, I've always felt that the candlelight vigil and the activities of Police Week were about the survivors. In fact, I was talking to some people in DC who are residents of DC, and they said, "Why are all these buses being driven around escorted by police motorcycles?" He said, "There might be 150, 200 police motorcycles escorting the buses. Those are the survivors. And they are escorted everywhere they go by police, and they're taken in buses to the different events." Tell us a little bit about that, because this event, yes, it's to honor the fallen, but it's really about helping the survivors deal with what they have to deal with.
I think you have to go back to the airport when they arrive.
Yes.
There's some, I've never been there to see it in person, but I've seen the videos and I've heard the stories from those who have been there. Think about it. These surviving family members come to Washington, D.C. They're told there's going to be some ceremonies, there's going to be some grief counseling sessions that they should participate in to help with their healing. They have no idea what to expect. I mean, think about it. How many of us go to a local ceremony of some sort to pay honor to a group of people? Maybe there's a couple hundred people there. There, a stage, a couple speakers, and not a huge deal. But when they come to Washington, they get off that airplane. They walk through the airport. As they get out of the gate, They're greeted by a formation of honor guard, police honor guard members who
Yep.
are standing at attention, saluting them as they walk into the airport. They didn't expect that, but this is the beginning of what they are about to expect and receive. The idea that there's going to be honor guards escorting them, as you say, they get police escorts from the airport to the survivor hotels. They get police escorts from the survivor hotels to the Candlelight Vigil and to the Peace
Right.
Officers Memorial Day service. It's an amazing experience for them. And every one of them that I've ever talked to after their first experience at Police Week, they are just in awe of how they were treated, how big and grand the events were, and how special they feel. And frankly, what's most important to them, I think, is to be surrounded by other surviving family members.
Yes.
So they
True.
know they're not alone and they're going through the same grief, the same emotional trauma. And all of a sudden, there's strength in numbers. There's strength in knowing that there's other people that have been through this. And then they talk to the survivors from earlier years who have gradually healed, and they let them know, hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel. That I'm happy now. I can smile again. I can laugh again, and I'll cherish those memories of my loved one. But there is life after their loved one's death, and I think all of that's very important in the healing process.
It's
So,
truly during National Police Week, and like you say, from the inception, coming off the airplane and the gauntlet of honor guard officers escorting them through the airport onto these buses. The buses are escorted. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of motorcycle cops at the airport waiting for each bus load of surviving families to attend. But the greatest thing about all that is the sense of honor, the honor, the esprit de corps, the camaraderie that exists, and what that particular week, that week of National Police Week, brings out in everyone. And you and I have talked about that before. We've talked about when I first started going, and I had gone for years, and we became good friends over the years. But I was so jaded and so calloused from my job, from all the negativity of the job and the politics and everything that goes along with that. But when you go there and you sense that absolute degree of honor, it changes you, and it's certainly changed me. And I can tell you, it's changed a lot of people because I know countless other law enforcement people that when they went there for the first time, they went there multiple times thereafter because there was something about being associated with that was regenerative. It brought you back to the humanity, the reason that you wanted to do the job to begin with. It's a special, special place and a special week.
Now,
I
question.
remember the yeah.
Yeah,
I was yeah.
go ahead, Dennis.
Go
Yeah.
ahead. No, I want to build on what Billy just said. I was a manager of radio stations down in Miami, and I think he was just maybe an officer, maybe a corporal when I first met him. He was out there pounding the streets, and he came into my office one day looking for donations for the police Olympics, right? You were an Olympian, a police hockey Olympian. And so naturally, I love to support police. I did support him. And then he told me, he says, you've got to go to Washington, D.C. Remember this, Billy? You were passionate. You said, you have to go to see what goes on during police week, how they honor these fallen officers and how they treat the survivors. You won't believe it. So one year I went with Billy. I met Craig, met all the people, and I don't think I've missed too many years ever since
You
because
were
like you
hooked.
said, yeah.
I
And
knew you'd be hooked.
well, you were
We
right.
joke with
Yeah.
Dennis. Everybody that's good friends with Dennis, we say, Dennis is cuckoo for cops. So, like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So I knew that he would absolutely be bowled over by going there, and absolutely was.
Totally
Dennis,
was. So
Dennis, was your daughter a law enforcement officer when you went to Police Week for the first time?
I don't think so.
I don't
No.
think so.
That's what I
No,
was
this was
wondering. Yeah.
because I met Mr. Billy back in the what, 80s,
Yeah.
90s. Yeah.
Yeah. Mid
So
80s.
yeah, and my daughter wasn't even born till 83. So
Oh, wow. Okay. Making us all feel old. Yeah.
yeah, but one of the joys of my life is having my daughter, who's now a lieutenant uh, with the sheriff's office here in Florida, to actually go with her to Police Week. And unfortunately, she got a taste of disaster while she was still in the academy. One of her academy cohorts, her brother was a motor officer with the sheriff's office, and he was on a traffic detail, and somebody just rammed into him. I mean, intentionally killed him. And so here she is, a recruit. You know, she's in the academy. This is her, one of her best friends is the sister of this guy. And all of a sudden, she gets a rude awakening of what it's like, the real. So she went to Police Week that following year because her friend's uh, brother was put on the wall. That was pretty, that's, you know, pretty young in your career to have to deal with that. Unfortunately, she's been there two or three other times when friends of hers have been killed in the line of duty. And
Yeah.
so,
And
but the honor of my life is to actually go there with her. That is special.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I remember that because I was there with you guys.
You were.
And there's something also to be said about the wall, National Police Week, and how it brings people together because many of us have connections to people that we knew and worked with that are on that wall. I mean, my first 5 years on the police department, four of my friends were killed in the line of duty, and all of them are on that wall. So you'll always remember that. And unfortunately, that wall grows every year. It's what was described as one of the very few memorials that's a living memorial where it changes every year because unfortunately, new names
Yes.
are added every year. So let's just give the audience a little bit more of a feel and understanding of National Police Week, Craig. I know that President Kennedy, back during his term, made it signed into law that May 13th would be National Police Officers Memorial Day. And it's certainly grown from there. But talk about the events of Police Week, starting on the 13th, the 15th, and just a quick encapsulation of what goes on.
And by the way, May 15th is actually Peace Officers Memorial Day. And that was enacted into law back in 1962. So, but again, as I mentioned earlier, the FOP, until they started their ceremony in 1982 in Washington, there really was no national ceremony to honor Police Week or Peace Officers Memorial Day. It kicks off, for the most part, I think people would say, on May 12th. May 12th is the day the Police Unity Tour arrives in Washington, D.C. at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. This is a group of police and survivors of the fallen who ride bicycles some 300 miles from different places within the radius of Washington, D.C. Over about 3 days, they ride 300 miles. It's grueling, it's taxing, but it's a very powerful experience. And that's grown from 18 original riders in 1997 to nearly 3,000 participants this year. And they come to Washington to raise awareness about the officers who've died in the line of duty. And they raise a lot of money to support the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. Since their outset, they've now raised more than $40 million to support the Memorial Fund, the museum, the memorial maintenance, and so many of the other programs. So it's an amazing group of people, and that alone is a powerful ceremony attended by maybe 5,000 or so people on May 12th. And that would be the highlight of most events, but during Police Week, it's just one of many. On May 13th, You have the Candlelight Vigil that we've been talking about. And, I go back to the original Candlelight Vigil in 1989. And I had a glimpse, a idea that maybe this thing was going to be special because that first year, even before we had a memorial on the site, we had some 2,000 people that attended that first Candlelight Vigil in 1989. And, we did it on a shoestring, a budget shoestring. We borrowed microphones and, amplifiers and lights and a stage, all donated to us by local law enforcement agencies. But what we had that first year was a replica of one of the stone panels that would be engraved with names. And we had some sample names inscribed on that sample stone. And the survivors that they went to that stone and they just imagined, their loved one's name on a national monument inscribed in stone. And I could tell how powerful that was going to be. So that was a glimpse of what was to come. This year, again, some 30 to 40,000 people attending the Candlelight Vigil. And we do read the names. When we dedicated the memorial in 1991, we did a 24-hour names reading. Every one of the names that was on that original memorial, 12,561 of them, were read over a 24-hour period, read through the night. We started at noon one day and it didn't end until noon the next. And people would come at 4 a.m. in the morning and stand at attention as the name of their colleague was read, and the families would be there. It was so moving. But we said, you know what? Every name that we add to that memorial since that 1991, we should give them the same honor. So every year at the Candlelight Vigil, we read the names of the new additions. This year, there were 345 new additions to the memorial. 145 of those names, 147 died last year. And the other names that were read actually died earlier in history, but were only recently discovered by the Memorial Fund. So, and that happens every year. So now May 13th, then May 14th, you have it's an amazing ceremony by the National Law Enforcement Emerald Societies. And
Oh,
they do
yes.
a pipe and drum march from near the Capitol to the memorial where they have a wonderful ceremony of speeches and musical tribute to the fallen. And that's always a highlight for me of Police Week. Also, along those days, we have a canine memorial service now that's
Right.
really grown over the years. Where we honor the fallen canines, the dogs that provide such an important service to the law enforcement community. And sometimes those dogs die in the line of duty, and those
Right.
canines are remembered at the memorial during these services. And then finally, on May 15th, you have the Peace Officers Memorial Day service, and that's at the U.S. Capitol now every year on May 15th. It starts at 11 a.m. Usually, the President of the United States is the keynote speaker. That's become the tradition. Occasionally, the president is out of the country, as he was this year. President Trump was in the Middle East. So, Vice President J.D. Vance actually delivered the keynote address and did an amazing job of honoring and comforting the survivors that were in attendance. And again, at that ceremony, as each name of the fallen is read, they go up, family members do, and place a flower on a memorial wreath, which is then transported to the memorial after the ceremony, where a honor guard, a rotating honor guard, stands watch for the fallen. It's much like what they do at Arlington National Cemetery with the changing of the guard. Very powerful as well. So these are some of the highlights. And of course, the concerns of police survivors I mentioned earlier provide grief counseling sessions throughout the week for the survivors in attendance. And that's also a very important part of the week, along with the Cops Kids Camp, where a lot of officers have just can't wait to volunteer and be with the kids of the fallen officers who just have a grand old time making friends and celebrating Police Week.
So you mentioned Vice President J.D. Vance being there just this past week, and you were up on the stage many times throughout those years. And I just like to share with everybody, back in the day in Craig's office, he had pictures with every president of the United States, every FBI, CIA, DEA, every director, every law enforcement dignitary. Craig, you knew everybody. And, it's pretty funny because there's several of my friends, and you know them, law enforcement, you know, veterans, chiefs, and whatnot. And they like to fondly refer to you as the Jesus of law enforcement because everybody knows you and everybody respects you and likes you. And you have had such an amazing career, such an amazing impact on so many people and on law enforcement across the board. Somebody that pretty much knows everybody, and if you don't know them, you're one person away from somebody that does. And since we're talking about you, let's go back and focus more on you than Police Week now. And let's get let's get to the beginning. So you graduated college and talk about that. You probably wanted to be a baseball player, but how'd you end up on Capitol Hill?
I went to George Washington University, and that's right near the U.S. Capitol, of course, right in the heart of Washington, D.C. I lived there for 4 years, met my wife there. It was a great experience, besides just playing baseball. And I was a political science minor. I majored in journalism. I like to write. But I also liked Capitol Hill. I liked politics, and that interested me. And I thought it would be my skill sets might be well suited for working on Capitol Hill. And I interned with the Congressman Nick Joe Rahal from West Virginia. But unfortunately, when I was graduating my senior year, I wanted to work on Capitol Hill, but Nick Joe Rahal wasn't hiring at the time. So I ended up going to the Congressional Placement Office, interviewed with a couple members, and Mario Biaggi, congressman from New York City, ended up hiring me. I was his legislative assistant for 10 years. And Mario Biaggi was the most decorated cop in New York City history when he retired from the department in 1965. I didn't know him when I was interviewing him. He didn't know me. We just got, by luck, paired together. And I think it was really something that destiny wanted to happen because I learned a lot about law enforcement through Congressman Biaggi. He would tell me all his stories of being a cop in New York City and walking down the street and tapping his nightstick on the windows of all the shop owners. And it was a different time for sure. But I got to know law enforcement through Congressman Biaggi. And of course, he was the champion of law enforcement. So anything that had to do with law enforcement came through our office. And one of those ideas that they wanted him to champion was to build a National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. And I was working for him at the time that he introduced legislation. It became law in 1984 to establish a National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. And after a couple years of struggling, we figured out what we had to do to get it done. And I went to him one day and I said, Congressman, if you want this memorial to get built, I'm going to have to leave you. I'm going to have to go and work full time with the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. And I hated to leave him because I love the man so much and admired him. But he gave me his full blessing. He said, Craig, absolutely. I want that memorial built. It was probably the most important accomplishment of his many years in Congress. He told me that many times, and he said it publicly. It meant so much to him to have a memorial to his profession that was so important to him. And that's really how I got involved. In the beginning, it was one of many projects I was working on for him. I viewed it as a job, nothing more really. And then I started to meet the survivors of the fallen. I started to meet the officers, and I had a much different appreciation for law enforcement and what this memorial would mean to the men and women in law enforcement. Vivian Eney was a person that really made a difference in my professional life. She was the survivor of Chris Eney. He was a sergeant with the U.S. Capitol Police, shot and killed in a training accident by one of his best friends. tragedy like no other. And I met Vivian. She heard me give a speech one day to a group of survivors that she was part of, telling them about this new memorial that was going to be built in their honor. And she called me a couple hours later, very bitterly, and upset, and said, "You know, those words rang hollow for me because when my husband died, I didn't really have that level of support. Nobody reached out to me on a grand scale, anyway, and I felt alone." And that touched me. And she said, "I got a handful of letters from a couple members of Congress, and those letters meant so much to her." And I thought, boy, if a letter of condolence would mean that much to a survivor, what would a national monument mean? And that really changed my perspective about what I was about to do and the journey I was on. It was the privilege of a lifetime. I was handed it, and I ran with it. And to this day, I couldn't be prouder of the way my life turned out professionally. I had no idea I was going to ever do anything like this, but we built a national memorial. We built the National Law Enforcement Museum, and we became the leaders when it came to promoting officer safety and wellness. And I'm very proud of all those achievements and all the people that I worked with along the way, including both of you. It means so much to me to this day.
So definitely incredible, incredible achievements. And that's why you were just honored with the highest award and the Lifetime Achievement Award. One little question more about that I want to ask. So when Congressman Biaggi came up to you and decided he was going to task you with this, what was your first reaction? Was it like, well, why me? Or, do I really want to do this? What were you thinking?
I think like I said, it was one project among many that I was tasked with. I didn't give a whole lot of thought one way or another to it. I equate it somewhat to running a marathon. Until you get in about halfway through a marathon, you have no idea what you've gotten into. You start to hurt. It's painful. You're like, why did I do this? In many ways, building the memorial and the museum was like running a marathon. Like if you knew all the struggles, all the hours and days on the road and all the work that goes into it, all the hurdles you have to clear with the review process for a memorial and a museum, the site selection, raising millions of dollars is not easy. But I had no idea about any of that going into it. So I was going in naive thinking, oh, this we'll get this memorial built in a couple years and I'll move on to something else. But you realize halfway through how hard it is, but it's too far in to turn around, right? So you're going to see it through to the end, one way or another. I remember when we were struggling after 2 years to build the memorial. Congress gave us 5 years in order to build that memorial, or at least to get ground breaking underway. And if we failed, then we would lose our authorization and we wouldn't be able to build the memorial. So 2 years in, we had raised $44,000, and we knew we need millions and millions of dollars. So we were struggling with fundraising. We didn't have a site selected. We didn't have a design. So one of our board members said to me, call Jan Scruggs. He built the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and ask Jan how he did it. What were his secrets of success? Maybe we could learn from him. And sure enough, I had lunch with Jan. He gave me a lot of good tips. He said, number one, you got to treat this like a job. You can't just do it on a volunteer basis while you're doing a million other things for Congressman Biaggi. So we hired Jan. He was our first full-time employee. He came to us with about 6 months before he went back to law school. And we started raising money through a direct mail campaign. And then we went to corporations. And before we knew it, we had a site selected. We had a great design designed by Davis Buckley, an architect that Jan introduced me to. And, 7 years after the authorization in 1991, we dedicated the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. And then, by the way, the museum effort, kind of came about as, what are we going to do now that we built the memorial? What's next? And we decided to build the museum. Had no idea it was going to take us 20 years, and we'd have
Right.
to come up with more than $100 million to build it. But somehow we were successful in doing that too. So a great journey. Couldn't be prouder. Glad we're still doing what we can to show a voice of support for law enforcement through Citizens Behind the Badge. That was really
Yeah.
something that came out of George Floyd's death, right? In 2020, the defund and defame the police movement took
Yes,
hold.
sir.
And I called you, Bill. Then we called Dennis. And we said, we need to do something to help law enforcement right now. They're hurting, and a lot of people are attacking them. And I said, would you be interested in starting a nonprofit that helps stop this defund movement and maybe does some good for law enforcement? And here we are today doing podcasts and writing op-eds and getting legislation enacted into Congress supporting police. We've done a pretty good job with this effort as
I
well.
would
So
say.
I'm proud
So
of
I
that.
so
would say.
probably I'm gonna say it started with destiny. It was destiny. Then it became your passion and your drive and your interpersonal skills. Your ability to write, your ability to speak in public is amazing. All of those attributes created that whole National Law Enforcement Memorial, the museum, the whole thing. I mean, you are the face of that. It's hard to think of that place without thinking of you. Dennis and I were there at the dedication of the National Law Enforcement Museum. You had to work on that and raise tens of millions of dollars to make that happen. And I remember you were standing there with uh, Bill Bratton. Bill Bratton was, a chief of police many places, and he was speaking about it, and he referred to the museum as the house that Craig Floyd built.
Yeah.
And I know that might not have pleased some people because they didn't get the recognition, but the person that absolutely deserved that recognition was in fact you. And what Bill Bratton said was 100% true, and you were standing there with Clint Eastwood and others for that dedication, and truly awesome. I mean, you did some amazing, amazing work, right, Dee?
Totally agree. As I always say in the intros to this podcast, this gentleman right here that we've been talking to today has done more for law enforcement than anyone that I know to honor not only the fallen, but also to never forget the survivors. And that's important. Craig, I want to do a quick lightning round with you. Can you do let's do a lightning round. Okay. I got 4 or 5 quick answers. I want based on your experience, based on your amazing accomplishments at the Law Enforcement Memorial. Here's a couple quick questions. Okay. Number one, what is your most memorable memory from all your years of service at the memorial?
You mentioned Vivian's story, so I'll go to another one. I spoke at the graduation ceremony for the Griffiths brothers. Their brother Sherman had been killed in the line of duty. They gave up their entire professional careers. All of them were doing different things, and they became Boston police officers to carry on Sherman Griffiths' tradition of service. That to me will always stand out as a highlight of the Memorial Fund stories that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, that's a great one. You could go on, but this is lightning round. So the next question, what was your most difficult moment?
I think in terms of difficulty, I would rank the National Law Enforcement Museum. There were many times during that 20-year journey where I thought we were going to fail to build that museum. And I felt so terrible because we had already raised millions of dollars from individuals, law enforcement associations, corporations. And for me, I was thinking, I'm going to have to tell these people that, their money is gone. We've spent it on architectural design or site selection or whatever, but we're not going to be able to finish the job. And sorry. But we didn't have to do that because somehow every time that it seemed like it was going to be a failure, somebody would give us $1 million or somebody would give us $18 million like Motorola Solutions did. And all of a sudden I realized, you know what, we're going to build this museum. But it was tough. And there were a lot of moments, dark moments, where I thought we were going to fail.
Mhm. How about your most touching moment?
You know, every time I wasn't even there. But Martha Wood, who's become a great friend of mine, she is a survivor of a fallen officer, Barry Wood, who died in a helicopter crash in Baltimore. He was a Baltimore City police officer. And Martha was devastated by Barry's loss. People were worried about her mental state. And she started coming to Police Week year after year as a volunteer. And gradually she got stronger and stronger. And one day she told me she was meeting with a little girl, I think 4 or 5 years old, had lost her father in the line of duty and was there at the memorial during National Police Week. And the little girl asked Martha to dance with her. And
Mm,
so Martha and this little survivor girl were dancing together at the memorial, and it gave Martha so much pleasure and feeling like she was doing some good, and her healing was helped by this little girl. And the little girl, obviously oblivious to her loss and the tragedy in her life, but to me, that's what that memorial represents. The fact that survivors can be there, they can dance, they can remember, and their loved one will never be forgotten. That's a
mm.
great thought that stays with me every day when I think about that memorial.
Absolutely, and obviously, there are thousands of stories like that. We could go on and on, but one other. What was your proudest moment? What was your proudest moment?
I think it happened when we dedicated the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. We had some 25,000 people in attendance that day. I had stayed up and pulled back to back all nighters because we had a staff of 6 people. We put on 3 days of events. I was trying to write speeches as I was giving speeches and trying to get maybe an hour's worth of sleep. But you know what? We pulled it off. Those 25,000 people felt really good about those 3 days of events. We had a procession from the Capitol to the memorial the day before dedication. We had the 24-hour names reading. We sold, tens of thousands of dollars of merchandise. We set up a shop with, again, 6 of us and some volunteers. And finally, we had the dedication ceremony for the memorial. I was exhausted. I went to sleep that night. We had a
Imagine.
little party back at the hotel for my family and friends. We had the presidential suite right at this great hotel. It could have had a grand old time. But you know what? I was asleep by 7 p.m. that night. But well, my proudest moment was after the dedication ceremony was over. Me and a guy named Joe Dean pulled up chairs and sat on the middle of the memorial grounds while everybody else was over at the wall looking at the names and leaving mementos. And Joe and I had worked hard to get that memorial built. And I think that was the moment that it hit me
Yes.
that, we had done something pretty special. And I was very proud of what we had accomplished.
Pretty special that's not the whole extent of it. It's amazing. I would encourage people, that are listening, even if you're not in law enforcement or not involved and don't have a family connection, go to DC next year during Police Week and watch what happens. It is nothing less than spectacular the way the heroes are remembered and the way their survivors are taken such good care of. And that is no mistake. That is no accident. That is because of Craig Floyd. Okay. This gentleman is the force behind all of this. And I am so delighted that you were recognized during Police Week with the John Ashcroft Distinguished Service Award, the highest honor that the memorial offers. You deserve it. It's a great honor. I know that you don't like stuff like that sometimes, but accept it, deserve it. It's for you. and it's been well earned. So it's just been a pleasure to watch you, to know you, and to see how you have succeeded through all these obstacles that have been thrown in your way. And there were many. Some we don't even want to talk about, but there were many, and you did it. So congratulations, my friend.
Appreciate it, Dennis. And you made a point earlier with the story about Bill Bratton and the house that Craig built, and Susie Sawyer at board meetings and other places used to refer to it as Craig's memorial. And I always cringed at those moments because
I
I
know.
I learned over the years that yes, I'm the face of the Memorial Fund, or I was for 34 years, and I'm so proud of that. And I knew I had to step up. I had to give speeches. I had to write, and I would get, more than my fair share of credit for what we accomplished. But, in the end, I learned a lesson that you have to have a sense of ownership among a lot of people for this to happen, for the memorial, the museum, all the other good things that we did. And people can't think of it as one person doing it. You've got to think that I'm an important part of it. I'm the donor. I'm a police officer who's spreading the word, like Joe Dean did in California. So it's very important for me to have everybody think of the memorial, the museum, as something that a big group of people did together, and that's really how it happened. I mean, without dignitaries and law enforcement leaders believing in it, adding their names and reputations to the effort, without corporations like Motorola and DuPont and Target and so many others giving tons of money to make these things happen, it doesn't get done. And yeah, I got to be the guy at the microphone, but believe me, I know all the people that helped. Nobody else probably has a clue, but I believe me, it took a village, if you will, to make the memorial, the museum, and everything else we did happen.
Well,
You were the leader, Craig. You were the
yep,
leader, and you were the glue that kept it together. And
that's right.
you are the main man.
That's right. And there were a lot of reasons, like in any organization, why it shouldn't stay together. And there are forces acting to, fight even the best of ideas. But there has to be the guy at the top, and you were that guy. And thank God for that, because now we have something that will last forever. So unbelievable.
Appreciate it, guys. Great
Ladies and
working with you.
gentlemen, you have been honored today to listen to Craig Floyd. Craig is, yes, he is generally a host of this show, but today he was the guest. He was the subject of a deep look into Police Week, into the Law Enforcement Memorial and Museum in Washington, D.C. And Billy and I, are both so proud to call him our partner and our friend. And we would pretty much follow Craig anywhere, wouldn't we, Billy? I think we would, no doubt about it.
Yeah,
Especially when he takes me to a great cigar bar and we have a nice libation.
we did have fun. Yes.
Yeah, well, we do have a lot of fun. So
Before we wrap up, there's one more thing we want to share with you. Earlier in the episode, you heard Dennis, Bill, and Craig talk about Craig receiving the John Ashcroft Distinguished Service Award, the highest honor given by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. What you didn't hear was the speech Craig gave that night. It was heartfelt, humble, and a powerful reminder of why we do what we do. So, before we close, here's that moment, unfiltered and in Craig's own words, as he accepted the award in front of family, friends, and fellow law enforcement leaders.
All right, so I got that email too. It said all the award winners had been notified and were prepared to give a 1 or 2 minute remark. I'm going to stick to my 1 or 2 minutes, but let me just say my memory right now goes back to Mario Biaggi, a congressman from New York City. Right out of college, I had the privilege of being paired up with him as a legislative assistant. As many of you know, he was the champion of law enforcement in Congress. And at that time, I had many issues that I was involved with in his office. But the one that stuck, and the reason why I entered this 40-year plus journey, is because he instilled in me a sense that law enforcement was special. And as time went on, I got to meet the officers. I got to meet thousands of officers. I got to meet the survivors of the fallen. got to know their families really well, got to know their loved one who died really well, even though I'd never met him. And then, 34 years later, we had built a National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. We built a National Law Enforcement Museum. That was a 20-year effort. And we became a premier organization in promoting officer safety and wellness. And I'm as proud of that as anything, because we got to keep the officers in good shape, the ones that are out there continuing to put their lives on the line. And what's great about tonight is I'm here with my family, who sacrificed a lot over the years. Best friends. And so many friends that were partners with me throughout this 34-year journey as I was CEO of the Memorial Fund. And I can't be prouder. And I'm so proud of the successors. We handed it off to Bill Alexander, who's doing a fabulous job. I love his passion. You remind me of myself a lot when I'm up at the microphone and I hear you at the microphone. We talk the same message. You love law enforcement. And Lori, I remember that phone call. I called her one day to see if John Ashcroft might be interested in being our chairman. And that was about 10 years ago. And Lori is now the chairman of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. God bless you, Lori. I don't like to have a lot of thank yous and speeches because I think that's kind of boring for people. But tonight I'm going to make an exception and say thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mick. Right.
So that concludes this episode of Heroes Behind the Badge. This is the podcast where we tell real stories about real cops. We expose the fake news about the police, and we bring you the real truth. This podcast is brought to you by Citizens Behind the Badge, citizensbehindthebadge.org, the leading organization in support of the men and women of law enforcement. Get involved, citizensbehindthebadge.org. You can subscribe to this podcast. You can like it. You can follow us. And you can also donate. Go to our website and you'll find tabs where you can actually donate to help us advocate for police. Join the hundreds of thousands of people already donating and supporting us in our efforts to advocate for the police. Okay? Stay tuned. Soon we'll be bringing you yet another episode, but that will wrap it up today for Billy Erfurth and Craig Floyd. This is Dennis Collins. We'll see you next time on Heroes Behind the Badge.